The Onyx Room occupied the top floor of a building that had witnessed Chicago's transformation from steel mills to stock markets, its windows offering views of the lake and the glittering skyline beyond. It was the kind of restaurant where reservations required 6 weeks' notice and a reference from someone who mattered, where the wine list read like a financial portfolio and the clientele treated servers like furniture that occasionally spoke. Lola Reyes had worked there for 3 years and understood the rules. Be invisible until needed, anticipate requests before they were made, and never, ever make eye contact with the wrong person for too long. Tonight, she broke all 3. The woman in the white dress had been difficult from the moment she arrived, sending back her martini twice, complaining about the temperature, snapping her fingers at the sommelier like he was a dog that had forgotten a trick. Anastasia Foster, daughter of one of Chicago's most prominent real estate families, engaged to Adam Houston, the tech CEO whose face appeared on magazine covers with headlines like "The New Face of American Innovation" and "Disrupting Everything." Lola had delivered their champagne, Krug, $800 a bottle, with practiced efficiency. She'd been turning away when Anastasia's hand shot out, grabbing the bottle to examine the label. What happened next occurred in the span of a heartbeat. Anastasia's grip slipped. Champagne fountained across the white tablecloth, and several drops landed on her pristine dress. "You clumsy!" Anastasia was on her feet, her voice cutting through the ambient music and conversation like a blade. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? Do you?" Lola's training kicked in automatically. "I'm so sorry, Miss Foster. Let me get—" "Sorry? Sorry?" Anastasia's face flushed red, fury transforming her carefully maintained beauty into something ugly. "You just ruined a Valentino original. I should have you arrested for assault." The restaurant had gone silent. Lola was aware of 50 pairs of eyes watching, of the manager emerging from the kitchen, of her co-workers stepping back to avoid the blast radius. She was also aware of the tremor in Anastasia's hand, not from anger, but from something else. The woman was drunk, had been drunk before she arrived, and was now looking for someone to punish for whatever private war she was fighting. "Miss Foster, it was an accident. If you'll allow me to—" "Shut up!" Anastasia raised her hand, and Lola saw the strike coming, an open palm aimed at her face with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences. But the blow never landed. A hand caught Anastasia's wrist mid-swing, fingers wrapping around it with enough pressure to make her gasp. Adam Houston had moved from his seat with a speed that belied his tailored suit and boardroom reputation. He held his fiancée's arm suspended in the air, his expression carved from ice. "That's enough," he said quietly. The room seemed to hold its breath. Anastasia stared at him, shock and rage warring on her face. "She spilled champagne that you dropped." Adam released her wrist and turned to Lola, his dark eyes assessing her in a way that made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen. "Are you all right?" Lola nodded, not trusting her voice. She hadn't flinched. She'd stood there watching the hand come toward her face and hadn't moved, hadn't cried out, hadn't given Anastasia the satisfaction of her fear. And somehow, in that frozen moment, she knew Adam Houston had noticed. He pulled out his wallet and handed her $500 bills. "For the trouble. And the dress." He glanced at Anastasia with something that might have been disgust. "We'll be fine. It's just champagne." Then he left. Just walked out of the Onyx Room without looking back, leaving his fiancée standing in her stained white dress and Lola holding more money than she made in a week, wondering what the hell had just happened. The manager appeared at her elbow 30 seconds later, his face pale. "My office, now." Before we see if Lola survives the night, I have a question. Is Adam Houston's territory safe where you live? Let me know where you're watching from down below. And hey, if you don't subscribe right now, I can't promise Anastasia won't come looking for you. I'm just kidding. Maybe. Hit that button and let's get back to the drama. The rain came down in sheets, turning the alley behind the Onyx room into a river of neon reflections and cigarette butts. Chicago rain was different from the soft drizzles Lola remembered from her childhood. It was aggressive and cold, the kind that soaked through clothes in seconds and made you question why anyone chose to live in a city that felt personally offended by human comfort. Lola didn't have an umbrella. She didn't have much of anything anymore. Not the job she'd held for 3 years, not the tips that paid her rent, not even the dignity of a proper termination meeting. Manager Davison had cornered her in the break room, his hands shaking as he thrust an envelope at her chest. "I'm so sorry, Lola. I really am. But people like that, they make calls. They have lawyers. Insurance won't cover the lawsuit if she decides to press charges for assault." "I didn't touch her." "You embarrassed her in front of everyone." He wouldn't meet her eyes. That's worse. The envelope had contained 2 weeks' severance and a handwritten note. "Please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." She'd left through the service entrance without another word. Her white shirt, now stained with champagne and tears she refused to shed, clinging to her skin as the downpour soaked through. The city didn't care. It never did. Chicago had a way of chewing people up and spitting them out into alleys like this one, where the rats were bold and the streetlights flickered like dying stars. Lola pressed her back against the brick wall and closed her eyes, letting the rain wash over her face. She'd survived worse. She'd survived her father's funeral when the insurance company refused to pay out. She'd survived 2 semesters of night school before the money ran out. She'd survived this. She had to. The sound of tires cutting through water made her look up. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the mouth of the alley, its windows tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. For a moment, Lola considered running. Rich people didn't park in alleys unless they wanted something, and she'd had enough of their wants for one lifetime. But then the rear door opened, and Adam Houston stepped out. He didn't have an umbrella either. The rain darkened his hair and spotted his tailored suit, but he didn't seem to notice. He walked toward her with the same measured confidence he'd shown in the restaurant, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "You're not going home," he said, not a question. Lola crossed her arms. "How would you know where I live?" "I don't, but I know what it looks like when someone realizes they don't have one anymore." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the sharp angles of his jaw, the faint scar above his left eyebrow. "I also know you're not the kind of person who cries in the rain. So what are you doing?" "Reconsidering my life choices." "Good, that makes this easier." He pulled something from his jacket. A business card, cream-colored and expensive. She didn't take it. "I need someone who can do what you just did in there. Someone who can stand in a room full of predators and not blink." "I blinked, I just didn't run." "Same thing." He held the card out again, and this time she took it. The paper was heavy, embossed with gold lettering. Houston Enterprises. Adam Houston, CEO. Below that, a handwritten number. "I've got a problem, Miss Reyes. Someone in my organization is stealing from me. Not money. Anyone can steal money. This is worse. Data, contracts, leverage, and they're smart enough to hide it where my auditors can't find it." Lola turned the card over. The back was blank. "So, hire better auditors." "I did, 3 times. They all came back clean." He tilted his head, studying her the way someone might study a chess piece. "You graduated top of your class at DePaul University. Forensic accounting with honors. You were recruited by 2 Big Four firms before your father got sick, and you had to drop out to take care of him. The air left her lungs. How do you... I make it my business to know things. He took a step closer, and Lola forced herself not to retreat. You've been wasting your talent serving drinks to people who don't deserve them. That ends tonight. Work for me. Find my traitor. I'll pay you more in a month than you'd make in 5 years at the Onyx Room. And if I say no, then you go home, dry off. Start looking for another job that won't last because people like Anastasia Foster own this city and they don't forget. His voice dropped, cold and precise. Or you take the third option. You stop being the person things happen to, and you become the person who makes them happen. The rain hammered down between them, filling the silence. Lola looked at the card in her hand, then at the SUV idling behind him, its engine a low purr of power and promise. She thought about Davison's shaking hands, about Anastasia's raised palm, about every condescending smile she'd endured while carrying trays of champagne to people who didn't see her as human. One condition, she said. Adam raised an eyebrow. When I find your traitor, I'm the one who tells them they're done. For the first time that night, he smiled. It wasn't warm. It was the smile of a man who'd just found the weapon he needed. Deal. The 42nd floor of Houston Enterprises smelled like power. Leather, expensive coffee, and the faint ozone tang of servers running overtime. Lola's new office was a glass box overlooking Lake Michigan, positioned directly outside Adam's private suite like a guard dog's kennel. The nameplate on her desk read Executive Assistant in brushed steel letters, but everyone who passed by knew what she really was. The outsider Adam had pulled from nowhere, the woman who'd replaced 3 auditors and a dynasty's worth of expectations. She'd been at it for 6 days straight, and the numbers were starting to talk. The financial records of Houston Enterprises were a labyrinth designed to confuse, but Lola had spent 2 years of her life learning to see through exactly this kind of smoke. Subsidiary companies nested inside holding corporations. Offshore accounts linked through shell entities in jurisdictions that didn't ask questions. Money flowing in directions that made sense individually, but formed a pattern when viewed from above, like an aerial photograph of a crime scene. Someone had been very, very careful, and they'd been doing it for years. Lola pulled up another spreadsheet, cross-referencing wire transfers against approved vendor payments. Her eyes burned from the screen's glow, but she couldn't stop. Not when she was this close. The same account kept appearing in the margins. A consulting firm called Meridian Advisory Group. They billed irregular amounts at irregular intervals, always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic review. 50,000 here. 73,000 there. Small enough to hide in an empire's cash flow, large enough to add up to millions over time. She was running the incorporation documents when the office door slammed open. Anastasia Foster stood in the doorway like a storm given human form, her white Chanel suit immaculate, her eyes promising violence. 2 security guards hovered behind her, uncertain whether to stop a woman who wore her power like a weapon. "Get out," Anastasia said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from never being told no. "This is a private office." Lola didn't stand. She didn't even look up from her screen. Not anymore. "Excuse me?" "I said it's not private, it's mine. If you want to speak to Mr. Houston, you can schedule an appointment through me." Lola finally met her gaze, keeping her voice level. "I have an opening in 3 weeks. Would you like the 2 p.m. or 4 p.m. slot?" The guards exchanged glances. One of them reached for his radio, but Anastasia raised a hand, stopping him. She stepped into the office, letting the door close behind her, sealing them in together. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped to something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. "Do you know who I am? The woman who tried to hit a waitress." Anastasia's smile was all edges. "I'm the woman who made Adam Houston. My father backed him when he had nothing but ambition and a good suit. We built this empire together. And you think you can just walk in here with your cheap shoes and your night school degree and take what's mine?" Lola saved her work and closed the laptop. She stood slowly, deliberately, until they were face to face across the desk. "I think Mr. Houston can decide what's his and what isn't. And I think you should leave before I have security escort you out." "You're threatening me?" Anastasia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really don't understand how this works. People like you don't threaten people like me. People like you disappear. They get on buses to towns their families came from. They wake up with their bank accounts frozen and criminal charges they can't fight. They learn that mercy is a gift, not a right. Is that a confession? It's a promise." Anastasia leaned forward, her palms flat on the desk. "Walk away, Lola, tonight. Don't come back. Because if you're still here tomorrow, everything that happens next is on you." The silence stretched between them like a blade. Lola could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, but she'd learned long ago that showing fear was the same as bleeding in shark-infested waters. She picked up her phone and pressed the intercom button. "Security, please escort Miss Foster from the building. She doesn't have an appointment." Anastasia's eyes went cold. She straightened, smoothing her suit with deliberate precision. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I've made worse." The guards appeared in the doorway, uncertain but obedient. Anastasia swept past them without another word, her heels clicking against the marble like gunshots. The door closed behind her, and Lola finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the desk until they stopped. Then she opened her laptop and got back to work. 3 hours later, she found it. Buried in the incorporation documents for Meridian Advisory Group was a name she recognized. Gerald Foster. Anastasia's father. The man who'd supposedly helped Adam build his empire. The man who'd been slowly bleeding it dry for the past 4 years. But it was the next document that made her blood run cold. An encrypted email chain she'd unlocked using credentials from Adam's server. Messages between Meridian and a contractor firm she didn't recognize. Discussions of security protocols and timeline adjustments, and the engagement party solution. The final message was dated for next week. Payment on completion. No loose ends. Lola printed everything, her hands steady now with purpose. She didn't know what the engagement party solution meant, but she knew betrayal when she saw it, and she knew exactly who needed to see this. She gathered the files and walked to Adam's office door. Through the frosted glass, she could see his silhouette bent over his desk, still working even though it was past midnight. She knocked once, then pushed the door open without waiting for permission. "We need to talk," she said. "Right now." Lola's apartment was in Pilsen, a neighborhood where the rent was cheap and the landlords didn't ask questions. She'd lived there for 4 years, in a third-floor walk-up with bars on the windows and a door that stuck in the winter. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The first place she'd ever lived alone, paid for with her own money, filled with furniture she'd assembled herself, and books she'd collected one by one from second-hand shops. The door was open when she arrived, not unlocked. Open. Hanging crooked on its hinges like a broken jaw, the frame splintered where someone had kicked it in. Lola's hand went to her phone instinctively, but she didn't dial. Not yet. She pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The destruction was methodical. Her couch had been flipped and slashed, stuffing pulled out like entrails. Her bookshelf lay face down, pages torn from spines and scattered across the floor. The kitchen cabinets hung open, dishes smashed in the sink. Her mattress had been dragged into the living room and cut open, springs exposed like ribs. But it was the wall that made her stop breathing. Someone had painted a message in red across the peeling plaster. The letters 3 feet high and dripping like blood. Leave town or leave in a box. Lola stood in the center of the wreckage, her messenger bag still on her shoulder, and felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest. Not fear, not anymore. This was rage, pure and focused, the kind that burned away everything else until only purpose remained. She pulled out her phone and took pictures. The door, the couch, the message, evidence. Then she started searching. They'd been thorough, but thorough people made patterns. Lola found her laptop in the bathroom, submerged in the toilet tank. Ruined, but exactly where amateurs thought sensitive information might be hidden. Her backup hard drive was gone from its hiding spot behind the refrigerator, but the decoy drive she kept in her desk drawer was still there, untouched. They'd been looking for something specific, something they thought she had. She was on her knees sorting through the torn books when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Last. Warning. Bus tickets are cheap. Funerals aren't. Lola deleted it and kept searching. 10 minutes later, she found what she needed. A USB drive taped inside the spine of an old accounting textbook, exactly where she'd hidden it after copying the encrypted files from Adam's server. She'd made the backup on instinct. The same instinct that had kept her father's medical records organized when the insurance company tried to deny his claims. Always keep copies. Always have proof. She pocketed the drive and walked out of her apartment without looking back. Adam's safe house was in Lincoln Park, tucked behind gates that didn't appear on any map and guarded by men who didn't wear uniforms. Lola had the address memorized from the emergency contact list he'd given her on her first day. A test, she'd realize later, to see if she'd actually use it. The guards recognized her immediately and waved her through without questions, which told her everything she needed to know about how closely Adam was watching his investment. He met her at the door himself. Still in his shirt and slacks despite the late hour, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. His expression shifted when he saw her face. What happened? They came for me. Lola pushed past him into a living room that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. All clean lines and expensive art and windows that overlooked the lake. She set her bag on the coffee table and pulled out the USB drive. Anastasia's escalating. She knows I found the money trail to her father, and now she's trying to scare me off. Adam took the drive, turning it over in his hands. Did it work? I'm here, aren't I? Something flickered across his face. Approval, maybe, or recognition. He plugged the drive into a laptop on the side table and waited while it loaded. Lola sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped between her knees, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. She'd been running on caffeine and adrenaline for a week, and the crash was coming. Talk to me, Adam said, his eyes on the screen. The Meridian payments go to Gerald Foster, but he's not the end point. He's funneling the money through 3 more shells before it lands in an account in the Cayman Islands. That account is linked to a security contractor called Aegis Solutions. Lola pulled up the photos on her phone and handed it to him. 2 days ago, they finalized a contract. The payment is contingent on successful completion of an operation scheduled for next Saturday. My engagement party. Your engagement party. Lola watched his jaw tighten. The encrypted messages referred to it as the transition event, They're planning to kill you, Adam, and they're going to make it look like an accident or a robbery or whatever story Anastasia needs to take control of the company." Adam didn't respond immediately. He scrolled through the files in silence, his expression carved from stone. When he finally looked up, his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. "How long have you known?" 3 hours. I came straight here from my apartment." "Your apartment that was just destroyed?" "Yes, and you didn't call the police." "What would I tell them? That the daughter of one of Chicago's most powerful families threatened me? They'd laugh me out of the station." Lola leaned forward. "We don't need the police. We need a better plan." Adam closed the laptop and stood, pacing to the window. The city lights sparkled below like a galaxy of trapped stars. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but absolute. "You're staying here, tonight and every night until this is finished. I'll have your things brought from your apartment, whatever's salvageable." He turned to face her. "And Lola, thank you for not running." She met his gaze and saw something there she hadn't expected. Vulnerability, hidden beneath layers of control and power. He wasn't just a CEO protecting his empire. He was a man who just learned the woman he was supposed to marry wanted him dead. "I don't run," Lola said. "Not anymore." The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the safe house, a space designed for someone who understood that luxury was about control, not excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, offering a view of Chicago that made the city look almost peaceful. The lake stretching dark to the east, the skyline glittering to the south. The grid of streets spreading west like a circuit board. The furniture was minimal. A leather sectional, a bar cart with bottles Lola couldn't pronounce, a desk that probably cost more than her destroyed apartment. Adam had spread the printed files across a glass coffee table like a general surveying a battlefield. Lola sat across from him, a tumbler of whiskey she hadn't asked for warming in her hands. She didn't usually drink, but tonight felt like an exception. Adam had been reading for 20 minutes without speaking, his face betraying nothing except the occasional tightening around his eyes when he reached a particularly damning page. Finally, he set down the last document and leaned back against the couch. 4 years, he said quietly. Gerald Foster has been bleeding my company for 4 years, and I never saw it. He was careful, and he had help from someone who knew your systems inside out. Anastasia. Adam's voice carried no emotion, which somehow made it worse. She sat across from me at family dinners, smiled at investors, wore the ring I gave her. He looked down at his hands, then flexed them as if testing their strength. I'm not angry that she doesn't love me. I'm angry that I was stupid enough to believe she might. Lola took a sip of whiskey, feeling it burn down her throat. This isn't about you being stupid. Betrayal works because the people who do it are good at lying. That's on them, not you. Is that what you told yourself when your insurance company refused to pay out for your father? She froze, the glass halfway to her lips. How do you know about that? I told you. I make it my business to know things. Adam met her eyes, and there was something raw in his expression now, something that looked almost like guilt. Victor Reyes, heart attack at 52. You were 20 years old halfway through your degree. The insurance company found a pre-existing condition clause buried in the policy and denied the claim. You spent the next 6 months fighting them while working 2 jobs and watching him die in a Cook County hospital bed. Lola set the glass down carefully, afraid she might throw it. Why are you bringing this up? Because I need you to understand something. Adam leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in the lines around his mouth. People like Anastasia, like her father, like the insurance executives who let your father die. They count on us being too tired or too scared or too broken to fight back. They build their empires on the assumption that eventually everyone gives up. I didn't give up. I know. That's why you're here. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with his. His palm was warm, calloused in unexpected places. You could have run tonight, taken the money I've already paid you and disappeared. Instead, you came straight here with evidence that's going to start a war. Lola looked down at their joined hands, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to be the professional, the forensic accountant who found the numbers and moved on. But sitting here in the dim light with Adam's confession hanging in the air between them, she felt the careful walls she'd built start to crack. "So, what do we do?" she asked. Adam's thumb traced a slow circle on the back of her hand. "We let the engagement party happen exactly as planned. Anastasia thinks she's won. She thinks I'm still the lovesick fool who doesn't see what's right in front of him. We let her think that. And while she's planning your assassination, we plan hers." He squeezed her hand once, then released it, standing to pace to the windows. "Not literally, but we destroy everything she's built. Her father's reputation, her access to my company, her future in this city. By the time that party ends, the Foster name won't be worth the ink it's printed in." Lola stood too, crossing to stand beside him. The city sprawled below them, millions of lives intersecting in patterns too complex to map. That's a lot of moving parts. If even one thing goes wrong, then I'll be dead and you'll be next. Adam turned to face her, and the distance between them suddenly felt charged with something neither of them had named. "Which is why I need to know you're all in. No doubts, no second thoughts. Because once we start this, there's no going back. I was all in the moment I walked into your office with these files." Lola held his gaze, refusing to look away even as her pulse hammered in her throat. "You gave me a chance when I was standing in the rain with nothing. I'm not walking away now. Even though it might get you killed, even though." Something shifted in Adam's expression. A door opening, a wall coming down. He reached up slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her jaw. "You're not what I expected, Lola Reyes." "What did you expect?" "Someone I could protect, someone who'd do what I told them and stay out of danger." His hand moved to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing just below her eye. "Instead, I got someone who breaks into encrypted servers and walks into war zones without flinching." Disappointed? Terrified. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Because if something happens to you—" Lola cut him off by rising on her toes and kissing him. It wasn't gentle or tentative, it was the kiss of two people who'd been circling each other in the dark and finally found the center. Adam responded immediately, his arm sliding around her waist, pulling her against him like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. When they finally broke apart, Lola rested her forehead against his, both of them breathing hard. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "The worst. We should focus on the plan." "Absolutely." But neither of them moved. Adam laughed quietly, a sound she'd never heard from him before. Genuine and almost boyish. "Come on. We have 6 days to orchestrate the downfall of one of Chicago's most powerful families. We should probably get started." Lola stepped back, smoothing her shirt, trying to remember how to think professionally while her lips still tingled. Right, the plan. They spent the rest of the night at the coffee table, building their trap piece by piece. Adam made calls to security contacts and lawyers who owed him favors. Lola drafted the presentation they'd use to expose the Fosters, laying out the evidence in a narrative even a child could follow. Somewhere around 3 a.m., they ordered food that arrived in unmarked containers. At 4, Adam finally convinced her to sleep on the guest room bed while he took the couch. But as Lola lay in the dark, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, she knew sleep wouldn't come easily. They'd crossed a line tonight, professional into personal, allies into something more dangerous, and in 6 days they'd either destroy their enemies or be destroyed themselves. She thought about her father, dying in that hospital bed, asking her to promise she'd never let anyone make her small. She thought about Adam catching Anastasia's wrist before it could strike. She thought about the red letters on her apartment wall, and she smiled in the darkness, sharp and certain. Let them come. The grand ballroom at the Drake Hotel was a cathedral of wealth and power, chandeliers dripping crystal light onto marble floors, polished to mirror brightness. 500 guests filled the space, politicians in their finest suits, business moguls with spouses draped in diamonds, society photographers circling like sharks sensing blood in the water. The engagement party of Adam Houston and Anastasia Foster wasn't just a celebration. It was a declaration of dynasty, the merging of old money and new ambition into something unstoppable. Or at least, that's what it was supposed to be. Lola stood near the back entrance in a black dress Adam had insisted on buying. Simple enough to blend with the catering staff, but tailored well enough that security wouldn't question her presence. She wore an earpiece hidden beneath her hair, connected to Adam's head of security, a man named Marcus who'd spent 20 years in the Marines and didn't ask unnecessary questions. Her tablet was synced to the ballroom's audiovisual system. Every file they'd compiled over the past 6 days loaded and ready. She watched Anastasia work the room like a queen holding court. The woman wore white again, because of course she did. A gown that probably cost more than Lola's destroyed apartment, cut to make her look angelic and untouchable. She laughed at the right moments, touched arms with practiced familiarity, and checked her watch twice when she thought no one was looking. Waiting for the timeline. Waiting for the hit. Adam stood near the center of the room, surrounded by investors and well-wishers, playing his role perfectly. He looked every inch the successful CEO in his midnight blue suit, his smile easy and confident. Only Lola could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked every entrance and exit, cataloging threats the way other men counted money. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and he gave her the smallest nod. It was time. The band finished their set, and the master of ceremonies, some local radio personality Anastasia had hired, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The happy couple would like to say a few words before we continue the celebration." Applause rippled through the ballroom as Adam and Anastasia moved to the small stage at the front. They looked perfect together, Lola had to admit, like they'd been designed by the same architect, all sharp angles and expensive polish. Anastasia slipped her hand into Adam's, her diamond engagement ring catching the light like a warning flare. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Adam began, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "When I started Houston Enterprises 8 years ago, I had nothing but ambition and a belief that Chicago, that America, deserved better than what we'd been given. Better technology, better infrastructure, better opportunities for the next generation." Lola's fingers moved over her tablet screen, pulling up the first file. She could see Marcus's security team moving into position around the room, subtle shifts that most guests wouldn't notice. But she noticed the moment Anastasia's people realized something was wrong. 3 men in server, uniforms who suddenly stopped serving drinks and reached for concealed weapons. Marcus's team was faster. 2 of Anastasia's men went down before they could clear their jackets, tackled by security guards who moved with military precision. The 3rd managed to pull his gun, but Marcus himself appeared behind him, disarming him with an efficiency that spoke of years doing much worse in much darker places. The crowd gasped and scattered, champagne glasses shattering on marble. Anastasia's smile froze on her face, her hand tightening on Adam's like a vice. "What is this?" she hissed, barely audible over the chaos. Adam's expression didn't change. This is what happens when you underestimate your opponent. He turned back to the microphone as his security finished securing the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. There's no danger. We've just apprehended 3 individuals who were planning to disrupt tonight's celebration. But before we continue, I think you all deserve to know the truth about the woman I was planning to marry." "Adam," Anastasia's voice carried a warning, but she was still holding his hand, still trapped in the spotlight. "You see, I've recently learned something interesting about the Foster family." Adam gestured to the massive screens flanking the stage, and Lola pressed send. "They've been stealing from Houston Enterprises for 4 years. Not directly. Gerald Foster is too smart for that. But through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts, they've siphoned nearly $60 million from my organization." The screens lit up with spreadsheets and wire transfers, the evidence laid out in numbers too clear to dispute. Lola had spent 3 days making sure even a child could follow the money trail from Houston Enterprises to Meridian Advisory, to Gerald Foster's personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. Anastasia tried to pull her hand free, but Adam held on, his grip iron beneath the civilized veneer. "That's not all," he continued, his voice cutting through the shocked murmurs rippling across the ballroom. "Those 3 men your security just apprehended, they're contractors from Aegis Solutions, hired by the Foster family to kill me, tonight, during the toast." The screens changed, showing the encrypted emails Lola had decoded. Messages between Gerald Foster and Aegis Solutions, discussing payment schedules and the transition event. Planning Adam's assassination with the same casual efficiency someone might use to plan a corporate merger. "This is insane!" Anastasia finally wrenched her hand free, turning to face the crowd. Her composure was cracking, desperation bleeding through the polished exterior. "He's lying. It's fabricated evidence. He's trying to what?" Adam's voice was cold now, all pretense of affection stripped away. "To avoid marrying a woman who's been planning my murder? To protect my company from the family that's been bleeding it dry? To expose the truth about the people you really are?" Gerald Foster pushed through the crowd, his face red with fury or fear. Lola couldn't tell which. "You arrogant little... We made you. Without my backing, you'd still be pitching to penny investors in shabby offices." "You're right," Adam said calmly. "You gave me my start, and I've repaid that investment tenfold. But somewhere along the way, you decided that wasn't enough. You decided you were entitled to everything I built." He looked back at Anastasia, and Lola saw something like sadness flicker across his face. "Did you ever care? Even a little? Or was it always just about the money?" Anastasia met his eyes, and for a moment, Lola saw the truth written there, cold and calculating and utterly devoid of remorse. "You were always too soft, Adam, too concerned with playing fair. In this world, fair gets you killed. Not tonight?" Adam pulled the engagement ring from his pocket. He must have slipped it off her finger when she wasn't paying attention, and set it on the podium between them. "Consider this engagement canceled. consider your family's contracts with Houston Enterprises terminated, and consider yourselves unwelcome in any business venture I have influence over, which, as everyone here knows, is most of them." He turned to address the crowd one final time. "I apologize for the disruption, but I wanted you all to witness this moment so there's no confusion about what happened here tonight. The Foster family gambled on my death and lost. Their reputation in this city is finished. Anyone who chooses to do business with them after tonight does so knowing exactly who they are." Security was already moving toward Gerald and Anastasia, not roughly but with clear intent. The message was obvious: leave now, or be escorted out in handcuffs. Anastasia looked around the ballroom at 500 faces watching her downfall, some shocked, some satisfied, all bearing witness. Her carefully constructed facade finally shattered. "You'll regret this," she spat at Adam. "My father has connections you can't imagine. We'll destroy you. You already tried that." Adam's voice was quiet but absolute. It didn't work. Marcus stepped forward, and the Fosters had no choice but to go. They left through the main entrance, their exit captured by a dozen phone cameras that would ensure the story spread across Chicago before morning. Gerald Foster's threats echoed off marble walls, but they were hollow now. The rage of kings who just realized they were only men. The ballroom stayed silent for a long moment after they left. Then someone started clapping. Lola couldn't see who, but it spread like wildfire until the entire room erupted in applause, not for the engagement that wouldn't happen, but for the spectacle they'd just witnessed. The fall of a dynasty. The rise of someone who'd refused to play by the old rules. Adam stepped down from the stage, weaving through the crowd toward the back entrance, toward Lola. When he reached her, he took her hand without hesitation, in full view of everyone still watching. "Ready to get out of here?" he asked. Lola squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of 500 eyes on them. "Absolutely." They walked out together into the Chicago night, leaving behind the wreckage of other people's ambitions and the beginning of something neither of them had planned for, but both of them wanted. The morning broke over Chicago in shades of amber and gold, the sun burning through the haze that perpetually hung over the lake like a veil. Lola stood on the penthouse balcony with a cup of coffee going cold in her hands, watching the world wake up below. From this height, the chaos looked almost orderly. Traffic beginning its daily gridlock on Lakeshore Drive, early joggers dotting the lakefront trail, the sprawl of humanity organizing itself into the rhythm of survival and ambition that defined this place. She hadn't slept. Neither had Adam. They'd spent the night fielding calls from lawyers and investors and journalists who smelled blood in the water. By 3 a.m., the story had spread across every news site and social media platform in the country. By 5, international business publications were picking it up. The fall of the Foster family wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a case study in corporate betrayal that would be dissected in business schools for years. Gerald Foster had been arrested at dawn, the evidence too substantial for even his connections to sweep away. Anastasia had fled to London on a private jet, but the damage was done. Their accounts were frozen, their board positions revoked, their name synonymous with treachery. In less than 12 hours, Adam had dismantled an empire that had taken 3 generations to build. The glass door slid open behind her, and Adam stepped out carrying his own coffee. He looked exhausted but satisfied, his shirt untucked and his hair disheveled in a way that made him seem younger, more human. He stood beside her at the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "It's done," he said quietly. "The prosecutors have enough to keep Gerald in custody through trial. Anastasia's passport has been flagged, If she ever tries to come back, she'll be arrested at O'Hare. Meridian Advisory and all the shell companies are being liquidated to recover the stolen funds. And Aegis Solutions? Their contracts have been terminated, and their CEO is cooperating with authorities to avoid charges. Turns out when the money dries up, loyalty does too. Adam took a sip of coffee, his eyes on the skyline. We won, Lola, completely. She waited for the satisfaction to hit, the rush of victory that should come with destroying your enemies so thoroughly. But all she felt was tired and strangely hollow, like she'd been running on adrenaline for so long that now, in the silence after the storm, she didn't know what to do with herself. What happens now? She asked. Adam set his cup on the small table beside them and pulled something from his pocket, a folded check. He held it out to her without meeting her eyes. This happens. $200,000, enough to start over anywhere you want, a new city, a new life. You've earned it 10 times over. Lola stared at the check, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. You're paying me to leave? I'm giving you a choice. He finally looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression that she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability wrapped in careful control. You came into this because I gave you no other option. You were standing in the rain with nothing, and I offered you a way out of the dark. But now you have options. You've proven yourself. You could work for any company in Chicago, any company in the world. You could finish your degree, start your own firm, do anything you want. And you think I want to leave. I think you deserve the freedom to choose without feeling obligated to the man who hired you. Adam's jaw tightened. Last night was dangerous, Lola. You stood in a room full of people who wanted you dead and helped me burn down one of the most powerful families in Chicago. That's not the life you signed up for. No, Lola said slowly. It's not. She took the check from his hand, feeling the weight of it, not the paper itself, but everything it represented. Security, freedom, the chance to walk away from the violence and chaos and build something safe and predictable. It was everything she should want. She tore it in half. Adam's eyes widened. Lola. She tore it again, the pieces fluttering to the balcony floor like confetti. I didn't come here because I had no options. I came here because you saw something in me that no one else did. Because you gave me a chance to use my mind instead of my hands. Because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw more than a waitress or a dropout or a girl who couldn't save her father. You could still build something somewhere else? Start over? Lola stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. I don't want to start over, Adam. I want to finish what we started. Last night proved that Houston Enterprises has enemies we haven't even identified yet. You need someone who can find them before they find you. Someone who's not afraid to stand in the line of fire. That's what I'm trying to protect you from. I don't need protection, I need a partnership. She held his gaze, refusing to let him look away. You told me once that I could either be the person things happen to, or the person who makes them happen. Well, I'm choosing to make them happen. With you, if you'll have me. Adam was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the morning light. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached out and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. You understand what that means? Being my partner, not just my employee, but my equal in building this company. The threats won't stop. The Fosters were just one family. There are a dozen more, waiting for any sign of weakness. Good, Lola said, and meant it. Let them come. We'll be ready. A smile tugged at the corner of Adam's mouth, genuine and unguarded in a way she'd rarely seen. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless." "Can't I be both?" He laughed, the sound carrying across the balcony and out over the city that sprawled beneath them. Then he pulled her closer, his free hand cupping her face, and kissed her the way he'd wanted to since the moment she walked into his office with evidence of betrayal and eyes that promised she'd never back down. When they finally broke apart, the sun was fully risen, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of possibility. Lola leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, and looked out at the empire they'd defended together and the one they'd build from here. "So what's first?" she asked. "Now that we're partners." Adam's arm tightened around her waist. "First, we have breakfast. Then we start identifying every other potential threat to the company. Then we expand into 3 new markets I've been eyeing. Then we change everything," Lola finished. "Exactly." They stood there as the city woke up around them. 2 people who'd found each other in the rain and decided to build something that would outlast the storm. Equals, partners, together. And Chicago stretched out below them like a promise, vast and chaotic and full of opportunities for those brave enough to seize them.